Welcome back to the 7th video in this tutorial series on testing your React and Redux web applications using Jest and Enzyme. Now, in the last video, we took a look at testing our action creators, and in this video, we're going to test our first connected components. These are components that are connected to our Redux store. Now, before we get started, I just want to take this opportunity to encourage you guys to check out the official playlist for this series, which is available on our YouTube channel. You can find us by either clicking the link in the description of this video, or you can look us up on YouTube, search for SimpleTut. Another really important thing for you guys to be aware of is that we have an official GitHub repository for all of the code that we are writing. At the end of each tutorial, we will push that code to this repository. So if at any point you want to examine the code in finer detail that we are writing, then of course you can head over here. You can find that a link in the description of this video. Alternatively, you can find it by visiting github.com/SimpleTut and finding this repository. And finally, I just want to ask you guys to visit our Facebook page. You can find that facebook.com/SimpleTut. Again, all the links for these resources are going to be available in the description of this video. Now, before we actually go ahead and start coding, let's just refresh ourselves with what we've actually been working on, because we have been working on a project. So the idea for this application was we were going to create this fairly simple layout where we have a header component with a logo. We then had this headlines component where we just have a title and description for the page. We then have this button, and when that is clicked, we dispatch an action that makes an asynchronous request to an external API, goes out, fetches some posts, and then we basically render them out on the page. Now, if we look at the actual application that we've built so far, you can see that's pretty much what we've got. If we click this button, we successfully get posts and we render them out on the page. So we're in a pretty good place. But we have written a lot of tests, but there is one file, which is app.js, which we have not written any tests for, right? So if we actually look at this, this is a connected component because we are connecting with the Redux store. We're actually getting posts from the store, and that's how we're actually rendering out the posts on the page. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, because this is kind of just in the root directory, I'm going to use a different naming convention here to write this test. Previously, we've been using a spec file, but I'm actually going to write app.test.js. This is another naming convention we can use when we're writing our tests. So the first thing we need to do here is in our app.js file, I'm going to add that data test attribute that we've been working with. So I'm just going to say that this is our app component. We can use that in our test. And then we just need to import the various different things. So we want to import our class. So we want to import that from app. We want to import from Enzyme, and we want to import the shallow method. We want to import our testing utilities, so our utility functions. So we'll find that in our utils folder, and we want to import both find by test attribute and our test store utility functions. And of course, we're also going to need to import React itself. So let's go ahead and import React. And then what we can do is we can just create our main describe, and we're just going to say this is for our app component, plus a function here. And then above this, we're going to create our setup function. So I'm going to create a const setup. And this is going to take the initial state, and if there isn't any, it's just going to be an empty object. And then we're going to create a const here for test store. So we're going to have our test store utility function here, and we're going to pass that initial state. And then we're going to create a const for our wrapper. And we're just going to do a shallow render here of our app component. But we're going to pass our store. So I'm actually going to rename this from test store to just store. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass that to my app component. So we're going to say store like that, and then we're just going to return our our wrapper. There we go. Cool. So now we can create a before each. So let wrapper, and just like before, we have a before each here that accepts a function. And all we're going to do is just go to our wrapper, call our setup function, and we need to create a const here for our initial state, and it's going to be an object containing posts with an array of objects. We're just going to have a title, which is going to have a string value of some example title, and a body. Going to have another string here of just some text. And what I'll do is I'm going to duplicate this a couple of times, probably 3 times here. And I'll just say 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll pass this initial state to our setup function here. Cool. So we're in a good place here. So let's write our first test. And it's just going to be a simple one. We're just going to say that it should render without errors. So pretty simple. And again, we're just going to have a const here for a component. Which is going to equal find by test attribute, pass it our wrapper component that contains our shallow render. And then if we just look here, we have this app component. That's what we want to check for. So we're going to make an assertion. We're going to expect that our component dot length to be 1. Cool. So that's kind of our test, right? Let's come over to our terminal here. I have this running, and what it's saying is that we have a violation, right? Because what I've done is I've passed the Redux store in props, and this has been removed from the API, right? So this is something that I really wanted to show you guys, right? So let's look at our package JSON, and of course, depending on when you actually are following this tutorial series. When we started this series and we installed React Redux, you can see here that we were on 6. And 6 actually had some breaking changes that was forcing people to work a little bit differently with testing connected components. It's very much moving towards React's context API. Something that has changed in version 6 was the ability to pass your store, your mock store, to connected components. It was removed. You cannot do that. However, this is something that is very new and is currently being discussed on the official repository for React Redux on GitHub. So I'm just going to come over here to actually show you guys. So of course you can see that this is the official repository for React Redux. Let's click over into issues, and you can see right here, potential issue with store as prop with shallow tests running version 6. So this was a very long, a lot of people are discussing this, and in the end, the newest version, the alpha release of React Redux, which is version 7, is actually, this has actually been restored, right? So you can actually do this again. So what we're going to need to do is actually just install the latest version of this dependency so that we can come back and continue writing the rest of our test. So the first thing that we need to do is we just need to end everything that we have currently running in our terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The next thing that we want to do is we want to delete all of our node modules. So I'm just going to delete the node modules folder. And I'm also going to delete these lock files. So I've been switching between yarn and npm. So if you have a package lock JSON file or a yarn lock file, then you're going to want to delete either or both of those. Okay, so the next thing is that we want to actually install the correct version, the latest version of those dependencies. So to do that, let's just check what is the latest version. So for me, I'm going to go npm view react redux versions. Click on return, and I get all the various releases for this this library. And you can see the very latest one here is an alpha release, is a beta release, sorry. And this is the one that we're going to install. So I'm going to copy that version, come over to my package.json file here, and you can see this is React Redux. I'm simply going to replace this with this latest version. Now, something else which is very important here is we also need to install the latest version of React. So let's do the same thing for React. So again, npm view react versions, and you can see the latest is 16.8.6. So again, let's come over to React 16.8.6. Cool. So we have done that successfully. So let's come back over to our terminal and let's just install those dependencies. So npm I. Cool. So those have now installed for me. So I'm going to rerun all of my tests. So npm test, and I'm also going to restart my application with your npm start. Now our tests are still failing, and you might be wondering as to why that is. And the easiest way for me to do that is to actually render out what's going on under the hood. So to do that, let's do a console.log of our wrapper, and let's call debug, and then let's return to our terminal. And down here you can see this is what we are getting in our console log. So again, this is probably not what you'd expect to see, but really we're just getting a declaration of our child component, which is our app component. That's the component that's connected to our Redux store. So in order for our test to pass, we need to access what's inside of our app component. Now the first challenge is to actually just remove or bypass this provider, which is this context provider. So to do that, we're going to return up here to our shallow render, and I'm going to add on another method, which is child at 0. Let's save that and let's come back over to our terminal, and you can see that now we actually just return our app component. This is our main. This is the component that we actually want to test. Now again, we're still kind of just getting the declaration of this component. We're certainly not able to access anything that's inside of it, and that is why our tests are currently failing. So to do that, Enzyme gives us a really useful method that you're going to use a lot once you start working and writing with tests for Redux, and that is the dive method. So let's add that on to the end and save, come over to our terminal, and you can not only see that now our test is passing, but we're getting exactly what we would have expected to when we've been previously working with other components. We're actually rendering out the contents of the component rather than just that declaration, that higher order component. So this is how you would test a connected component. You have to mock the store, and then of course you have to actually dive into that component to actually access the contents of it for you to test. And again, something that's also important to point out here is that we created our initial state, and we passed this posts array, which contained 3 objects with a title and body 1, 2, 3. And if we actually look at what we're rendering in the child component, we have 3 list items, and that is how our that component is configured to work. So we know that that test is passing successfully, and that is how you test a connected component. Cool, so we're now in a pretty good place to actually remove this console log here. Let's save that. Let's make sure our tests are still passing. They are. Let's actually run all of our tests. So I'm going to say press A. That's going to run all the tests in my application. Everything is passing. That's great. So let's return over here, do a git status, and let's see what we have. I'm going to do git add. I think it's we're in a good place to actually commit those changes. So let's do that. We've made changes to our package JSON, app.js, and we've also made a new file called app.test.js. So I'm going to commit that. So git commit with a message, new tests for connected component app.js. Cool, so do another git status. That's ready to push. So I've been working on this feature branch called connected components. I'm going to do git push origin, and let's push that up. That's pushed successfully. And at the end of this tutorial, I'm going to go up, create a pull request, and merge that into master. So it's ready for you to head over and check out the changes that we've made if you would like to do so. And that brings us to the end of this video tutorial on testing connected components. These are components that are connected to our Redux store, as you've seen. Although we do use a lot of the same utility functions, there are some differences, and it's really important for you to be aware how the library is changing. And of course, as you've seen, we used the very latest release of the React Redux library, which is great for you moving forward with writing your own applications using the very latest tech that is out there. Of course, I'd just like to take this opportunity to encourage you to check out the official playlist for this video series on testing with React and Redux. Again, there'll be a link in the description of the video, but please do check out our channel. You can search for Simple Tut. And of course, please like, comment, subscribe as always. But I look forward to seeing you again in the next one.